Hey guys, Pastor Ryan Hurt here at LBC. I'm so excited that you've tuned in to listen to this message. But before we begin, I would ask that if you've been blessed by LBC or these sermons, that you might consider giving back to us so that we can continue to put out these resources to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ, both here in Lingoville and the world abroad. You can give on this app or website. As happy as we are that you have tuned in, we do ask that this does not take the place of being a part of the local church, and we encourage all folks to be a part of the local body. We're glad to provide this sermon for you, and I pray that this message helps you and you're growing in Jesus Christ. Blessings.
As they make their way out of here, as you can see, we are going to do church a little different this morning. Me and Cassie and several of us were talking about that this morning, like who made up the church model that it has to be a certain way, and anytime you get out of that, it feels weird, doesn't it? It feels awkward, but I love awkwardness sometimes. It's good for church people, man. Just get out of the bubble, get out of what we're used to, and so I'm super excited about our discussion time. It's going to be a discussion about something that we've been talking about over the past several weeks, and hopefully you leave here a little encouraged. But before we get to our topic today and our discussion, I want to introduce those that are up here on the stage with me. We'll start at the far left of the stage. Would be, in the fine words of Forrest Gump, my mama, Rhonda Hurt. And man, for those of you that weren't here, all right, mama, get a hand. Man, so if you were here about a year ago, man, a crazy scare happened. Literally, my mom had like a mini stroke in real time. Like, she's up here, and it's obvious about 30 minutes into the sermon, like her elevator hadn't gone all the way up that morning. I mean, there was just something not right. It was scary. It was probably one of the scariest days of my life, and it was scary because in ministry, like, you don't ever have a plan B. You just come up here and start hollering at everybody about Jesus, and like, I didn't have a plan B, so it was just a scary morning. We left that church service to a hospital where they definitely found something in her head, some kind of stroke of sorts, but she came back several weeks after that. They wanted her to come back and check her, and so she goes back to the doctor several weeks after that episode. And the doctor literally told my mom, we can't find anything. And so, man, it was, let's give the Lord some praise in that. Because my mom will tell you, she's like, oh, I know exactly what happened. She said, I truly believe that I was healed that morning in a church service. If you were here that Sunday morning, it will forever go down as one of the scariest moments, but one of the most sacred moments as a group of people, Ashley Hines and a group of people felt led to just come down, lay hands on my mama in real time, like in the middle of church service. And they prayed over her then, and then we still were trying to kind of figure out what was going on. Was mom just nervous in service one? And so we were outside underneath the tabernacle. Cassidy Click. I get all y'all mixed up. Cassidy Click was taking pictures, and she just captured, it was a moment there that we were out underneath the tabernacle. Golly. Man, you can tell that I was broken. I was scared to death, and I thought we were losing my mom. And so we were out underneath the tabernacle, and some people felt led enough to go and pray for my mama. And Joey has cropped the picture. Thank you, Joey, because in the first service, my underwear was hanging out in that picture. So, but it was, again, it was a sacred moment, but it was a scary moment. And again, I'm just so thankful that in the fine words of Dumb and Dumber, that mom gets to totally redeem herself this morning, and just so excited about my mom's wisdom. Listen, if you are here today and you have a kid that's out in the far country, as Luke 15 says, a kid that's a prodigal, this is a picture of why it's so important that we never quit praying for our kids. I don't care how far gone they are. Don't stop praying for your kids. My mom was on, and I'm not discrediting my dad. My dad, I'm sure, prayed for me too, but there's something about a praying mama. And I know that through my smoke-filled 20s, when I was shooting the finger at the Lord, my mom was on bended knee praying that I would get a glimpse of him once again. And although I know without a shadow of a doubt that mom knew that God would be faithful to that, I can promise you on her piece of paper, never did she dream that me and her would be sitting on a stage in a church that I'd be pastoring, talking about how much we love Jesus. And so it's just a testimony of the importance of prayer and why we should never stop praying. We're never so far gone that God can't step into our story. And this is a living testimony of that, but just super excited. Mom brings a lot of wisdom to the table, and not just because she's my mom. I've watched her, and I know the Lord has worked through her, but I've watched my mom single-handedly the Lord working through her changed the life of my wife, Melissa. And so I've watched her wisdom just be poured out. And so, man, y'all are in for a treat today. And so just so thankful for my mom being here. Next to her is one of my dear friends, one of the sweetest men I've ever known in my life. He's an elder here at Lingoville, Gary Clayton. Gary Clayton is he's the husband of Cindy Clayton. So if you come Wednesday nights or you come to the Bible studies, Cindy leads our women's ministry out here. And I love Gary. I love his heart for the church, his heart for the scriptures. The dude knows the word, has a love for people. And when I was thinking about just people who just deeply love the Lord, Gary was one of the first people that came to my heart. And so I'm blessed by him that he's joining us. And then next to him, last but certainly not least, would be Hannah Gifford. And again, just super blessed that God has crossed our paths as well. And what I love about Hannah is she is in that younger generation where, man, we just so desperately need a younger generation, not just showing up to church on Sunday, but excited about Jesus. And Hannah is just that. She oozes Jesus everywhere she goes. She lights up the room wherever she goes. But what I love about Hannah even more than then just coming in here in this consumer mentality on Sundays, she's pouring it back out in others. And I've watched her single-handedly be a part of my daughter's life and pouring that Jesus into my 18-year-old daughter, Kendall. And so I'm just super thankful for that. That's eternal stuff. That's stuff that we're going to be celebrating 10,000 years from now. And I'm so thankful and grateful for what she gets to share just for a demographic that's mainly the large part of our demographics here at the church today. And so super, super pumped about that. And so with that being said, listen, they're not public speakers. And so give us some grace in that. We'll try to land this plane as quick as we can, while at the same time, let's just have some grace and mercy in that. But if y'all will, can we give these guys a big hand for joining us here this morning? It was funny, my mom walked in the church this morning. She goes, I know where I'm at and I know where I parked. And I was like, thank you, Lord. So it's going to be a good day. So the question that I get asked all the time, and I mean, I would almost say every week, but pretty much every week is how do I stay in the trenches of my faith? It's easy to come up here and preach a sermon on Sunday, right? And if all I wanted to do was just be a preacher, that's an easy gig. I always say a preacher it's a lazy man's job if all you're going to do is download a sermon and come preach on Sunday. But anybody that knows me know that that's not my story. You know that I have a deep love for the Lord. And so what comes from that, from my close friends is, and especially those that are new to the faith, how do I stay in the trenches of that? How do I stay excited about Jesus 20 years in ministry when things can get a little chaotic, when the rug can get pulled out from underneath you, when the phone call comes, when ministry can be difficult and the sheep bite back sometimes? Like, how do I stay so in love with the Lord? How do I keep that first love the scriptures would talk about? And so today's conversation is going to be just at the four of us just having a conversation of how you guys have been able to stay in the trenches when things got chaotic, how you've been able to stay in the trench with a generation that's swimming upstream to that's cheapening the grace of Jesus, that just is okay with really anything as long as it's not hurting anybody else. Like, how have you been able to stay faithful? How have y'all been able to stay faithful through the years of being in this and not just going through the motions? But when I think about this, I think about that 2 Timothy 4:7 kind of faith. It was a faith that Paul would charge Timothy to. At the end of his life, Paul knew that his death was coming. And in his testimony at the end of his life, I hope will always and forever be mine. But he says this, he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. And so today I want our conversation to just be around that. Like, how can we, at the end of our lives, as a brand new believer or someone that's been in the faith for a long time, how can this be our story at our funeral when the preacher's preaching our funeral? Would this be said about us, that I've fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I've kept the faith? And so today I want to look at the how you guys are being able to do that. How are y'all being able to fight the good fight of your faith, run that race with endurance, looking to Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith? And so, Mom, I'm going to start with you. And I'm going to start with you because, and I'm not calling you old, but at the same time, you've got some wisdom, right?
It's
and
okay.
so, well, wise is a better word. But I feel like I'm getting old. I mean, I'm pushing like 50 now. I'm like, if you round my age up now, I'm closer to 50, which is scary. And so you've been knowing Jesus and loving Jesus even longer, and that's a long time. And so for me, it's amazing to me that you've been in this faith journey as long as you have. And much like Hannah, when you walk into a room, that there's something about you that just lights up the room. I mean, you just radiate Jesus. You have a deep love for the Lord. if you know this about my mama, like you get in time and you get in her Bible time, she gonna give you the look. She has her time, and that's her and the Lord's time. And so you have a deep love for the Lord, a deep love for the scriptures. And so can you share how you've been able to still this long into it, just like people, my grandpa, her dad, if you just say Jesus around him, the dude just goes down for the count, and so does my mom. And so I don't know where I get it from, but how have you been able to, over the years, be able to just stay in the faith in that same place that Paul was able to?
Okay, first I want to just thank y'all all for your prayers. Before I answer your question, the things I remember about that one day is people praying for me. I don't remember anything else, but I remember the prayers, and thank y'all. And I get to redeem myself today, so I get to talk about why and how I love the Lord so much. And so when you ask me that, of course, before I do anything, I always pray about it. And during my prayer time, the how I do it, that was easy for me. But the Lord just kept laying on my heart. Why? Why do I love the Lord so much on Monday, on Tuesday, not just on Sunday? And my first reaction or my first thought was, because he loved me first, because he died for me, a horrible death. And that's a good one. I mean, that should be the number one. But I thought that's a blanket. I mean, that's for all of us as believers. And I thought, what about me? Why? Why do I love the Lord as much as I do? And when you had called me or texted me, I was in the Song of Solomon studying it. And in chapter 8, verse 5, it says, "Who is that coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved?" And it just spoke volumes to me, because that's me. When you get to be my age in this walk, I've walked through numerous wilderness times, some really dark times. Ryan talks about him being the prodigal son. I have 4 boys, and I had 3 prodigals at one time. Difficult time. But I love this picture because it says, who's coming up with her? And she's leaning on him. And that's why I love the Lord so much. One of the many, many reasons is that looking back through all my wilderness times, he walked with me through it. He never left me alone. And yes, you're going to have wilderness times, but I learned, and I'm still learning, I just lean into him more and more. And how I do this, the first one is I have to daily spend my alone time with the Lord. And it's got to be just me and the Lord. I mean, the group prayer, your prayer with your families, those are all good things. But I love in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all record Jesus' prayers, that it would say that he went away, he went to the mountain, he went alone, he would leave his disciples. He knew the importance of being alone with his Father. And so if it's important for him, it's got to be for us. And during those wilderness times, that's what got me through those times. And it's what still fuels my fire even to this day, is I treasure that quiet time, no distractions. It's just me and the Lord. And I love that. That's one of the hows. And the other is his word. I love and treasure my time alone in the word. And I would encourage any of y'all, I mean, 1 scripture a day to keep the devil away. I mean, that's good, that's okay. But this is our love letter. This is the way the Lord speaks to us. And how will we listen to him? How will we know if we're not spending time in his word? And so I treasure that, my alone time with him. And my scripture here that the Lord just kind of spoke to me, because it went back to my wilderness time. It's Psalms 119, 92 through 93. If your law, which is your word, your instructions, if your law had not been my delight, I would have perished in my afflictions. I will never forget your precepts or your word, for by them, by these words, you have given me life. And so I love that David delighted in the word, and I delight in the word, but I just love that I would have perished without it. And one of those wilderness times that I had to go through was with my mama. She was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And for almost a year, I had to watch my mom basically die. And so I cried out to the Lord. I would spent a lot of time alone with him. I spent a lot of time in his word. And one particular, at that time, I was going through the book of James. And I know you're familiar with this passage, but it's 1 James 2. It says, count it all, that's everything. Count it all joy when, not if, when you face trials of various kinds. And when I read that, I was sitting up in the bed next to my mom's room there, and when I read it, I thought, Lord, how can I count this joy? My mom's dying, and you want me to count this joy? And I remember just vividly, I got up, got on my knees, like I did with Ryan and Robbie and Rusty, but I got on my knees, and I just began to pray, Lord, I believe your word. Your word tells me to count it joy. Not joy in the cancer, but joy in you. Help me find that joy in you through this. And I could go through numerous things. One of the times I got to listen to my mom get up on the piano, and I hadn't heard her play in years, and she played and sang, and she didn't sing real good, but I got to witness that. But the one that will always be my sacred, joyful moment in the Lord is she hadn't been able to go to church in months, and her pastor brought the deacons and their wives over and did the Lord's Supper with my mom. My mom was sitting on one end of the couch, I was in the middle, and my dad was on this side of me, and we got to all take in the precious Lord's Supper. And then we sang this song, and I was sitting there thinking, oh, I get to hear my mom's beautiful voice again, my dad singing. And then it dawned on me, my mom and daddy didn't become believers until later in life. I never got to do communion, celebrate the Lord's death and resurrection with my mom and dad. And I thought, that's the joy. That's the joy that the Lord gave me. I'm going to tremble now. But anyway, I loved it. And so that's what gets me up on Monday, on Tuesday, is that I know the Lord, and He's going to walk with me through my wilderness. He's going to walk with me in my good days, in my bad days. His word is going to feed me daily, and that's why I love the Lord so much.
Awesome. Ooh, that's good stuff right there. See what I'm talking about? Got some wisdom. All right, so next to her, Gary, I'll give it over to you, but what I love about Gary is that the Gary that I know found out a little different today in real time, first service. But what I know of Gary is a deep love for the Lord, a deep love for the Scriptures, and you've had a similar story as mine. We're both drug babies. We were drugged to church every time the doors were open, and as far back as we can remember, grew up in the church, and so what I love about you is that you have every right to be that old, cantankerous, bitter, grumpy, complaining about everything Baptist guy, and you're not. But you love people well. You love me well. You've been such a blessing to me and my family. And so can you share just how you've been able to do that and that journey that you've been on to not fall into that place that church can so dangerously create, right? We can just come in here and start going through the motions, especially if you're older in age. It's really easy to come to church. And how have you been able to buck that and make sure that hadn't been a part of your story?
Well, I told Ryan in the first service, I hate to burst your bubble, but I think at one point in time I did become that old grumpy Christian churchgoer. And I forgot to read I was so grumpy, I guess I forgot to read the verse that I had up on the screen today. But as you look at Psalms 37, 23, and 24, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he stumbles, he shall not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. And thank God that was a key in my life, that the Lord did uphold me. I got to get my notes here. Now, Cindy, we have paid this bill, right? I can throw this away when we're done here. This morning I got up and I thought, I might want to make some notes because it's pretty easy to forget where you're at or forget what you're saying. And so I scribbled on a Farm Bureau bill or something, anyway. So we started out in Anson, Texas at a small Baptist, I say small Baptist church. We had around 500 there. And if you know Anson, it's not a booming place. There's no dancing in Anson, and I'm telling you, there is no dancing in Anson. Cowboy Christmas ball at Christmas, the adults get to dance, but if you're a child, you better not dance. And so grew up there in a very strict community, grew up with Christian parents that taught me if you drink, you're going to the bad place. If you smoke, you're going to the bad place. I mean, it was a very strict environment that I was brought up in, but it was really great to be drugged to church. I really appreciated the type of church that I grew up in at First Baptist there. We had wonderful pastors there. We'll never forget their names, R.B. Hall, Bob Eklund, and Alvin Hiltbrunner when I was going through there. And I grew up in a revival time. I mean, we had revivals every summer, and we was there every night till it was over. And so I'm very thankful for that, and really I don't see a lot of difference in some of those pastors and Ryan. Now, I never did get to see their arms and all that to see what, if they had writing on them or anything, but they always had on the three-piece suits. So that was the difference, but the word was still the same with those guys. And so whatever they did in the seminary back then, it was good because, man, it reached a young teenager from Anson, Texas. But as I progressed through Tarleton and Texas A&M, I kind of got away from the flock just a little bit. We'll revisit that flock business later, but I got away from that a little bit, and I'd be at IHOP on Saturday morning or Sunday morning with a couple of my buddies. We'd be eating that pancake or egg pancake trio, or I don't know what they got a name for all those things. And we'd be reading the Houston Chronicle sports page or something, on Sunday morning instead of going to church where I should have been. After I got out of A&M, went to moved to Belton, and I met this young lady after 3 or 4 years in Bell County, I met this young lady, and she had a kind of a different impact on me. When you got a keeper, guys, hey, when you got one, keep them. In the parking lot at UMHB, she said, "Are you going to church with me in the morning?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Well, if you're not going to church, I guess this relationship's over." I said, "What time's it start?" So when you got them, keep them, because God only made a certain number of really godly women, and I got one. I'm not going to do this. So, we went to First Baptist in Belton for a while. Brother Leroy Kemp, a big, imposing figure, great pastor. But again, the three-piece suit, everybody dressed alike, looked alike, probably judged everybody that didn't look like them. I shouldn't say that. I don't know that they judged them, but you get the picture. Then we went to Granbury, First Baptist in Granbury, another one of those prim and proper deals, and probably somewhere along in there in our transition to Wise County and Decatur, I began to be that crusty old crotchety Christian. And man, I ain't proud of it. It's just, you're kind of a product of your environment. I'm going to say, and I may be wrong with this, but if you take a great Christian and you put them in a mediocre environment, they're probably going to gravitate toward mediocrity.
That's good.
But if you take a mediocre Christian and put them in a great environment, guess what? They gravitate toward greatness. And I think that's what's happened in this church. We're all mediocre people until we decide not to be. If we believe God is great, we're created in His image, we possess greatness. Hey, why aren't we great? So somebody has to help you unleash that greatness, and that may be you that has to recognize that you have that greatness. But I guess that's why it's so special to come to this place and to see what goes on in the love. And Todd Brown, Todd was at the first service. He's not here. You know, I met him early on when they moved here and we moved here, and I was standing at the back of this church one Sunday and I was crying. And Todd said, "What's the deal?" And I said, "I just can't believe the love that's in this place." And so, very critical that we love on people, because, man, it had a profound impact on me. And I'm going to tell you, it helps to have that curly-headed lady sitting on the couch every morning at 7 o'clock reading her Bible. And I get to see that example for me and my children as well. You know, it's not I'm not in this on my own. When you say I do, it's what you're one together, and now you're down that road together with God. And so, very critical thing that I have such a wonderful wife. We'll visit later when we have a question later on. But my favorite Bible verse, I'd be amiss if I didn't say this, because it definitely got a hold of me. But if you do step away from the flock, 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. Now, your version may say a little different. I love that King James flower in that one right there. King James isn't the best one all the time, but man, I like the flower in that verse, because he's seeking you. I mean, that's a verb. He's going after you. So it's critical that you know that and that you work against it. I was reading a devotional this morning, and my wife's probably going to laugh at me for bringing this up. I'm about done, I promise. But in the devotional, it brought up a book called "Oh, the Places You'll Go." Anybody read that book? So who writes what's the book? Dr. Seuss. "Oh, the Places You'll Go." Listen to it. You can get it on audio. You can read it. It's written or read at a lot of graduations, and so one of the things in that book that I remember, they're talking about the places you'll go, the games you'll play, basketball, volleyball, or whatever, and it says sometimes you'll play lonely games too, and games you can't win because you play against you. Don't play against yourself. Surround yourself with the right team members, and you ain't gonna lose. And the right team members are right here, godly people. These two ladies right here, they're good team members. I can tell you, I've listened to them once this morning. It was good. That said, I'll pass the torch.
Awesome. And what I love about your story, Gary, is that, and you shared this in the first one, is that he was at this other church, and he said that he looked up and realized, and you kind of alluded to that, but he looked up and realized that he had become the very person that he swore he'd never be. And I think, and I love that with 1 Peter 5:8-9, because that's how the enemy's looking to devour us. I always say that. He's not coming in like a linebacker. He's coming oh so subtly that we're going to look up 20, 30, 40 years down the road and go, man, where did my passion go? Where did my angst go for the Lord? And I love it that, and I learned that about Gary this morning. What I know, the Gary Clayton that I know, loves the Lord ferociously, always open for whatever, loves people. And I literally learned that about Gary. I was like, I didn't know that when you walked into this place, you were that guy. Had I known you were that guy, that would probably been scary. But you just never were. You didn't ever seem like that to me. And so I learned that about Gary this morning, that he was that cantankerous person that the church had created you to be.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I was faking it to you, I guess.
Yeah. And I didn't get no emails from him or nothing, so that's even better. But with that being said, we'll turn it over to Hannah. But before we do, So if you've been a part of this church for any time, hopefully and prayerfully, and if you haven't, we really want to encourage you to fill out that planning center, get a part of our planning center. That's not just to get plugged into our ministries here at the church as we grow, but it's also to paint a picture of what's going on out here, who's coming to church out here, the demographics of what's coming out here. And so it helps us gauge how we can do ministry and what age groups to go after, where we're lacking stuff. And so before we turn it over to Hannah, I want to there's a slide on the screen here, and I don't want to bore you with a whole bunch of numbers and facts, but if you know I'm a stats guy, I love stats, and this is real-time stats from our church out here at Lingoville. 802 total users. So 800 of you guys have filled out this information, and this is what's painting the picture of what's going on out here at Lingoville. Sadly, right off the bat, you see the 33. That's 19 to 25 years old. So we can see real quick, we're doing a poor job reaching that 19 to 25 age group outside of inside like a Sunday morning mindset. Granted, the Hill is killing it, doing an awesome thing. But we are doing a poor job at reaching that age group. And so that helps paint that picture. Okay, what can we do to reach that 19 to 25? But what I love about all of these numbers, and again, I don't want to bore you, but if you were to go all the way to the 102, not that the other ones don't matter, because they do, but I wanted to paint this picture for Hannah's setup. So from that 58 to 102 is from ages 0 to the age of 50. If you were to add those numbers up, it's 499 people of our church are in that 0 to 50. I mean, just look at what is that, 1 to 11, my eyes are terrible, that second number. I mean, we've got a lot of kids, we've got a lot of youth, we've got a lot of young adults here. In fact, demographically, we have a larger group of young people than most churches do. And so it makes things a little hard because we got a lot of new believers, we've got people that haven't grown up in the church and don't remember what, people like when Gary's talking about the three-piece suit, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's good and that's bad because we're kind of having to everybody's kind of having to learn. So we've got a very young demographic. What I love about this number too, that 217 of those 499 folks are simply from the age of teenager to 35 years old. That's unheard of in most churches. I mean, we've got a large group of youth kids that are at church and I'm not saying this to boast about this church, I'm saying it to boast in the Lord and a great youth pastor who loves our kids and loves them well. But to see so many young people come in here, and so as that kind of sets up Hannah's talk, Hannah, I got two questions really for you. Number one would be, do you believe that there's a young generation that's excited about Jesus? And then what kind of wisdom could you speak into that generation to stay in the trenches of their faith?
So I do. I think that we're super excited about our faith. I was thinking about this, and of course, the first thing that came to my mind was all these revivals that have broken out on college campuses. Like, what a time to be alive, to be able to see that. And so not just in that aspect, but in my personal life too. I've gotten to see it at the Hill. There's just a group of people that are so excited and want more and are just desiring more of His presence and wisdom and teaching. My friends and my family that are in the dating scene, I was joking with First Service, like, thank goodness Cole and I met so early because that world, it seems rough, but they're so devoted to their relationship with Jesus and their relationship with God, and they're just unwavering in that. And then even at my job, being able to see nurses just unrelentlessly speaking the gospel of Jesus to patients, that's been incredible too. So I do think that we're in this shift of excitement for Jesus with our generation. And when I was thinking about what is our generation? What does that look like? You've got these millennials that are really driven and super busy and work really hard and a lot. And then you've got the younger generation a little bit below us that are super opinionated and they want to stand for something and fight for something. And those two things can be great or they can be detrimental. And we've seen them drive world riots and we've seen them drive world revivals. And so I believe that it's a constant battle of flesh and spirit that we're in on that. And so when you ask me that question, what keeps me in the trenches, I think it's strengthening our spirit. And I don't think it was by mistake. The Lord's had me in a study in Psalms. I've just started it from the beginning and been walking through it. And a lot of these Psalms are written by David. And if you know anything about David, 9 times out of 10, he's writing these praises and declaring God's glory in a cave or a prison. And so I'm like, let's look at David. He's obviously got something figured out. How does he have joy in his heart in a cave or a prison? How does he declare God's glory in those places? So I originally planned on being in Psalm 26, but that's not where God had me this morning. He moved us right into